With that performance of The Pines of Rome by Respighi, we've come to the end of this concert from the Civic Theatre in Halifax. It was given by the BBC Northern Symphony Orchestra, leader Dennis Simons, and the conductor was Edward Downes. So may I wish you a very good night and return you to the studio in London.
I might just mention before we go on, although I'm afraid we're 5 minutes late, that next Wednesday, the 3rd of February, the BBC Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Michael Gielen, will be playing a concert of music by Berg, Schoenberg and Brahms at the Royal Festival Hall. They begin with Berg's 3 pieces, the Lyric Suite, and that's followed by Schoenberg's Erwartung, in which the soprano soloist is Phyllis Brynjolfsson. In the second half, there's a performance of Brahms's Second Symphony. Now, we'll be broadcasting this concert on Radio 3, but if you'd like to go along to the Royal Festival Hall, there are still some tickets available from the box office from between £2 and £7. That's Wednesday's concert by the BBC Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Michael Gielen, beginning at 8 o'clock at the Festival Hall. This is Radio 3. And now Stephen Games presents The Necessary Art, a documentary assessing the career and influence of the architectural historian Sir Nicholas Pevsner, who is 80 years old today.
When I wrote my Pioneers, what I thought I described was the coming of the millennium. To me, what had been achieved in 1914 was the style of the century. It never occurred to me to look beyond. Here was the one and only style which fitted all those aspects which mattered, the aspects of economics and sociology, of materials and function. It seemed folly to think that anybody would wish to abandon it.
Sir Nicholas Pevsner in 1966, in characteristically self-questioning mood. For 30 years, he had been educating and campaigning, exploring those awkward areas of architectural history which had been so often ignored or dismissed. In the course of his career, he would become a Royal Gold Medalist, Slade Professor at both Oxford and Cambridge, and an advisor on most national bodies concerned with architecture and the arts. But now, in his passionate commitment to truth and openness of scholarship, he sits in front of the microphone in the glare of his own penetrating spotlight, trying to explain to himself, as much as to his audience, the dilemma of the rational man, himself, out of step with an irrational world. If that searching analysis seemed unsettling in 1966, how much more so 30 years earlier? The architectural historian Rayner Banham was one of Pevsner's students at the Courtauld Institute, perhaps even his spiritual heir. From what Banham says, it seems inevitable that Pevsner's systematic Teutonic scholarship should have come as a shock in the genteel tea rooms of English academia.
English architectural history in the 1930s was a fairly moribund art. It was pleasantly amateurish, fairly quiescent. For instance, continental Baroque had hardly figured at all in English views of architectural history before he arrived on the scene. I mean, it was put down by people like A.E. Richardson. I remember Richardson being asked a question about Baroque at a seminar of some sort in about 1946, and saying that awful A.E. Richardson accent, which I can't hope to imitate, but something like, Baroque, it's just a corruption of the Portuguese word barroco, which means a black pearl. It's nothing to do with architecture. You know, that was 46. The arrival of Pevsner had a galvanic effect on some people. It simply opened up their eyes to the scope of architectural history. I mean, my introduction to the idea of architectural history as an intellectual discipline is entirely Pevsner. Nothing I'd read, nothing I discussed with my architect cousin or other architect-interested people I knew suggested that there could be as rewarding body of systematic study of the history of architecture as Pevsner revealed to me in Pioneers of the Modern Movement. You know, the book was a real eye-opener. I discovered, actually today, looking at old notes, that he, in fact, was the first person to formulate in so many words that things which are good of their kind will consort well together. I love the word consort. That's a real Pevsnerism there. The things that are good of their kind will consort well together, which means that you could build in the style of your own times, which is what he would expect everybody to do, but next door to something in the style of another time. And if they were both good of their kind, then that would be fine.
The need for professionalism in architectural scholarship had been spelled out in 1928 by Kenneth Clarke, now Lord Clarke, in the introduction to his book The Gothic Revival. How could it be, Clarke wondered, that his book was the first to have appeared on the subject for 50 years? If the Gothic Revival had taken place in Germany, it would have been well documented by now. The trouble with the English, he suggested, was that they only wrote about the things they liked, and there was little that you could like about Victoriana in the 1920s. What we needed, he proposed, were historians for whom the quality of the subject was irrelevant. In Germany, as Clarke pointed out, that kind of disinterested scholarship already existed, and there was one young man who was particularly well versed in it.